Hey everyone, we're live. As you can see, it's been a while, but I guess last week it wasn't meant to be. There was a lot of stuff on. I think we had earned a mini break, and we now have Senior Bowl stuff and Senior Bowl footage, Senior Bowl tape. We'll wait for it to warm up slightly, and then we'll get into the defensive standout players from Mobile. But yeah, Griff, is there a tangent that you're willing to go on this week, or?
Man, I hope we're excited for some fun and intriguing fourth round options.
Oh, well, you could save that for a podcast. That sounds really depressing, though.
Oh, you mean I thought you meant a Senior Bowl tangent.
No,
All right, well, here's one for
they're
you.
rusty.
There was a striking lack of complimentary Reese's candy bars available. I feel like if they're going to do like a whole thing where they're, the whole branding is Reese's Senior Bowl, there should be actual Reese's candy bars in the vicinity. I didn't see a lot of that.
What that makes it sound like you were in Mobile.
I wasn't in Mobile. I'm not trying to
Have you got like? Is that per
project like that.
sources?
I don't know. It was just kind of a cursory inference. Maybe I'm being too hasty in assuming that. What? But let's segue, or let's turn this into something more substantive. How do you feel about Reese's peanut butter cups?
I'm a big fan, especially down in Mobile. And I have to say, I mean, I don't use the term candy bar. So,
Well, yeah, they're not a candy bar, are they?
right. So when I was there was not a shortage of Reese's. So maybe, inflation.
Oh, really?
Back-to-back years, I was loading up on peanut butter covered
Well,
chocolate.
I mean,
covered peanut butter.
Tell us about that a little bit. So, like, were they just like in bowls, like available and everything?
Yeah. You kind of feel bad because it's complimentary, but should you really
I would
be
have just
walking out with a hoodie full of
I would have done that. I would have brought like bags and like.
And then in the press box at the time, I believe it was new. They had the Reese's with like I think it had popping candy and maybe some kind of jelly bean in there in a bar format.
That's disgusting.
Yeah, but in Mobile, other items are consumed, such as alcohol, and after a bit of drinking. No, that actually didn't help, but I saw it might. It's good to get the sugars back on board.
Yeah, why not?
And no, you do get a lot of fairly complimentary candy. So I don't really. Is this a disinformation campaign because you're secretly a Shrine Bowl enthusiast?
Does the draft start in Vegas? I don't know.
Are you a? So I say Vegas, right? But I am guilty of not being from America. Some Americans seem to say like Vegas.
No, we all say Vegas.
You sure?
No one says Vegas. Are you kidding me? Or even like a long E, Vegas. No, it's Vegas.
Okay.
Pronounced like an A.
Guess I just messed up.
I don't know where you heard that from, young man.
Should we do the podcast?
Yeah, let's do the podcast.
Okay. Welcome to the Seattle Overload podcast, where we are here to talk about the Reese's 2020. You're Reese's?
I'm Reese's, yeah. Short E.
Are you a Nike or Nike?
Or no, not a short E, a silent E. Nike. Long E.
You're Nike?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Indeed. Are you a Nike?
Yeah.
That's crazy. Well, it's a Greek word though. Don't you pronounce the E Nike?
I mean, I don't know. I'm not Greek.
But still, we can.
Right. As the American, you are really, really wanting to pronounce words in the way that they were
Right,
originally pronounced.
it's
Yeah.
really important to us over here to do that.
I understand that. I will be more sensitive in the future. Anyway, Nike/Nike do manufacture the Reese's uniforms, and we are here to review the 2023 Senior Bowl. We are going to dive into the defensive prospects that stood out from practice. We've watched a practice film. Like the video as Taylor has. Thank you very much, Taylor. Good to see you. And here we go. So let's start with we're really looking here at the major needs from Seattle's perspective on defense, not just vacancies, but more kind of areas that it was obvious that in as the season progressed, they would need to upgrade and may be able to upgrade given their vast amount of resources. Reese's resources.
Nice.
There we go.
That was good.
So let's start with outside linebacker because obviously Darrell Taylor, he wasn't quite what they were expecting at the start of the season, but he still finished with a high sack total. Uchenna Nwosu seems like a very, very good number 2. Probably not like the premium blue chip kind of dude, but very good mid-tier ad. But adding another one of these guys would be great. However, Griffin, outside linebacker at the Senior Bowl at least, wasn't the best.
Yeah, it was a rough group. They were really lacking like one guy who could be, at least has the obvious makings of someone that can be a big time dude at the next level. Of the defensive ends slash I guess edges, we should group them together. Of those guys that maybe has the potential to really be like a big time player, probably be Keon White. The thing though with him though is that you wouldn't classify him as an outside linebacker. He's a guy that could very well go in the second round. Maybe if he wasn't 23, 24 years old and was coming out like at 21 with that same level of output, maybe he could be like a fringe first kind of player. He certainly has the traits for it and skill and everything. But then with him, he's like 275, 280, if not 285. So can you play him an outside linebacker? If he's there in the third round, somehow he falls, then you're looking at that draft value, then for Seattle's purposes, then sure, go ahead and take a guy. And then that just means you're just gonna have to play around with where he plays. And you can't play him as much as you'd like, or you might need to accommodate him a little bit schematically and do some things overall on defense you probably don't want to do too much in. But again, third round, that's where you're willing to kind of take those plunges. You wouldn't want to do that with a first round player or a second round player unless they were just so good it was worth bending your scheme. So it's a tricky draft or a tricky Senior Bowl roster in that sense.
Yeah, and you've sort of hinted at your views of the whole draft as well, in that after a Will Anderson, there isn't necessarily an outside linebacker who's
right,
worth taking in your view.
Right. Yeah, it's a rough draft in that sense in terms of like the classic sub 260 guys.
Yeah. So yeah, that's important, I guess, to talk about. When we talk about the outside linebacker types, the ideal one would be, I mean, it's got lighter and lighter, but, well, to a degree, but it would be kind of 250, 260 pounds, but sub. But also they just need to win with speed rush, get off, and be able to drop into coverage a bit. And they ideally have over 33-inch long arms. The big player, of course, in that kind of mold, although he is slightly light, was Iowa State's Will McDonald IV, who you very early on, when I was like, Griff, tell me what pass rushers to watch.
Yeah. As a pass rusher, I mean, he is intriguing. I mean, he's like the get off is very high end. The bend is probably elite. like the agility and all that stuff. He actually has pretty active hands. The main thing though with him, whenever you're talking about Will McDonald's, that the guy's like 235 pounds. So he's incredibly long too. And he's so flexible that he's able to like win the edge with speed and then, preempt having contact issues by just dropping his pads and bending underneath guys and being flexible like that. Offensive tackles just can't get their hands on him. So, I mean, he makes it work for himself, and he has active hands. Like he will, if he doesn't win with speed, he will throw hands and try to win and get into a favorable position and can bend under a table and still produce. For his size, he actually plays a lot bigger than his weight, but you're still talking about a guy like if he's 235, he might play like a 245 pounder. But he's still gonna get knocked around a lot. So I feel like, for that reason alone, you can't really draft him in the first 2 rounds. He has to be a 3rd rounder. He probably goes in the 4th round, in all honesty. But
really, because
I
the one
so.
thing with him is, what helps him play slightly bigger is the fact that he has 35-inch long arms. But
and
then the other thing is, I think he was on Bruce Feldman's freaks list, and I think he'll test really well, which probably, despite the fact he's tape-wise probably 3rd, 4th round player, that probably maybe boosts him up to 2nd round, especially with how the rest of the class is shaping up.
That's a good point. With the depth of the class being so poor, it might shoot him up. Also, like you said, with his length and general frame, NFL teams might think they can easily pack weight on him. He might be one of those guys that's just so skinny. He doesn't really, that's his body type, but I don't know. It would be cool if he could put on 10, 15 pounds and then see what's there. He should still have plenty of explosiveness. I mean, I really like him as an edge rusher.
It's an interesting one, that as well, but with packing on pounds, because at Iowa State, he played quite a bit inside, right? Like a kind of in that weird, well, not
they have
weird,
that weird
but
scheme.
Like there's a 4-eye technique. 4 technique on the head up of a tackle. So he's playing kind of inside. You'd think he'd have bulked up slightly more if he was going to, but then also maybe the arm length and the fact that he had get off meant he didn't need to. But I kind of would get the idea that he can't really bulk up, because, I mean, maybe we see him come into the combine at like 250 and he runs fast still, and then that could change some minds.
That would, raise some eyebrows.
At the Senior Bowl, like his inside move was really catching eyes, and his spin move and his length was causing guys some issues in the one-on-one drills. But
and the thing with those one-on-one drills though is that like inside moves are kind of fake. Just because you're on an island.
They should win.
It's impossible for the tackle, really, the offensive tackle. But I mean, I thought he did play well in the practices and the drills and stuff. I mean, he was definitely one of the edges that was making the most noise. So along with Keon White. So go ahead.
And well, you keep mentioning Keon White. So what is he exactly? Because I went into this thinking he was more of a kind of a interior defensive line. But you're like you think he could live a bit on the edge, or is that because he's kind of like a 4-3 end, where like in nickel, if Seattle's going to run 2-4-5 looks, he'd be like the D end there, not a 3 tech.
Right. I mean, every edge rusher that is 280 or whatever, you'd like to think of as a Michael Bennett type, but honestly, he's less of a big end and more of an end that is big. As in, you can't play him at 3 technique or 4-eye a lot on early downs. He's more of a nickel flex, a guy that you can put all over the line in passing downs. So he's gap versatile in that sense, but he's not a 3-down gap versatile guy. Like, he needs to be on the edge. That said, because he is bigger, like you said, when they play 2-4-5, he can be the outside linebacker in that, where he's locked to the line of scrimmage and actually make a difference versus the run there in those contexts. But then as you weave in and out of all your calls, do you want him playing, outside linebacker a lot? You're going to have to see him in coverage. I mean, my view really is that if they could do that with Carlos Dunlap and not really affect the defense that negatively, if Keon White, in their view, is a good enough overall player, then they can stomach dropping him 3 to 5 times a game if it means getting all those other reps as a pass rusher and a run defense on the outside. So, but overall, I mean, I think I just think he's a 280 pound classic edge defensive end. So yeah, I don't think he can play inside really. Because I mean, some of his run reps, I mean, he was getting dug out when they had him playing 3 technique. It's just not where he needs to be. He needs to be on the outside.
Yeah, that stood out to me just across the board. Like, this was your assignment, so I didn't pay as much of attention. But the lighter guys, the technique that they're using on the inside, probably because they haven't played in a defense where they're asked to play 5 tech or 3 tech and essentially step into the guy in front of them, keep them off the linebacker behind.
Right.
But their technique was it was a shambles. Like, it was really bad.
Yeah.
And so that's just stuff which, you factor into the evaluation. You'd have to coach that up. It's to be expected, probably.
Right.
But yeah. And just last thing on him, should say he had 33 and 5/8 of an inch long arms, which is clearing a kind of a threshold. I think 33 inches is probably what they want. And before we get to the interior defensive line, guys, Byron Young from Tennessee, who had been mocked by Mel Kiper I quite like the thinking of it's a Senior Bowl guy, aging guy, outside linebacker type. It's a Seahawky kind of vibe out of Tennessee. He only had 32 and an eighth of an inch long arms, which even if the Seahawks like him, it's very, very, very unlikely. They'd have to love him especially take him in the first round at 20 overall. That essentially for me rules him out. So, and did he pop Griff or?
No.
Okay.
No. So I mean, that was
good for him. Good for him. Right. Moving on.
Yeah, go ahead. Well, I was going to say a guy we haven't even mentioned who probably might be the biggest profile name is Foskey, Isaiah Foskey.
Yes, who was on the national team out of Notre Dame.
He did nothing, in my opinion, and I did not like his tape either.
Ooh.
So he did not have the senior year that he wanted to have. It's slim, man. It's real slim.
Yeah, and as we were saying in the pre-show, the offensive line they were playing against was pretty good, and we will have an offense episode where we're talking about the offense. Still, you would have liked to see more stuff. What was Andre Carter like out of Army?
So
everyone was saying he was light, but is that? And I know that Army has a weight,
right?
Some weightlifting restrictions because they're training for the Army, not necessarily football.
Mm-hmm.
And so his lower body's quite thin.
Yeah, I mean he's legit unplayable against the run. Like, he's a mess. So like the thing, I feel so cruel saying that, but the thing though is that he actually did some things as a pass rusher, much more than Foskey did, and they're similar concepts, right? So yeah, I mean he actually got after it, but then anytime in the team practices and stuff they went under center, he was just getting tossed, just blown off the ball. So if you're talking about a guy that can only really give you anything on third down, then I would just rather go the Will McDonald route. I'd rather if I'm looking for a depth pass rusher, just give me Will McDonald. So I don't want to play with, because he's probably better. He is much better in coverage than Andre Carter. So I mean, I don't know, maybe Carter can put on 30 pounds or 20 pounds, but I just watching some of these plays, I was like, the NFL probably doesn't even want to draft him. It's really bad.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
so should we go to before we start beating up on prospects who didn't shine in the way that we may have hoped? Shall we go to interior defensive line, or so that you're not exhausting your enthusiasm? Shall we zigzag to
Sure.
the inside linebackers?
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Well, Maddie, what'd you see there?
Okay, well, because I'm lazy, you can look at what the Seahawks are probably looking for from an inside linebacker and use your brain and sort of do a bit of work. And inside linebacker is a position where it's been getting lighter and lighter, and gone are the days of everyone turning up and then being 245 pounds or heavier and still being able to run fast. It's a different position. But when I went through the measurements, Diane Henley out of Washington State at basically 6'1", 230 pounds with 33-inch long arms was an intriguing guy. He was on the national team. He was wearing number 1, and he was really, really good. Now, not quite like a day 1 pick, but I was surprised I hadn't heard more about him. Now, what I think limits him from being a day 1 pick is, well, he'll turn 24 in November, which, age is still, you have to factor that sort of thing in. He previously played at Nevada and was a wide receiver, which
Really?
showed for his first 2 seasons, which shows up in his coverage, where in one-on-one drills and stuff, I think he let up 1 catch the whole game, but he was getting constant pass breakups. His length was winning. He was super patient. And how it works in the one-on-one drills is the first day, the running backs, they just run like flat routes. The second day they change it up a bit or over the middle routes. The second day they change it up and they introduce like a wheel route and more vertical stems, and they introduce like a sail route out of the backfield as well. And then the third day they introduce kind of option angle routes or out routes along with all of the over stuff. And he was just brilliant all 3 days. But the receiver background also, like in his when he's getting drops, occasionally he's slow to like click and close, burst out of his shuffle because his feet are a bit kind of skew-if. But he can run kind of, but I'm not sure it's like a 4.4 type speed.
Yeah.
Again, Jordan Brooks was an incredibly rare prospect, especially sort of with hindsight in terms of how he tested and then his tape. But Henley, like getting downhill, because the knock on him, I did a bit of background research. The knock on him was there were issues fitting the run, and the kind of like, taking on blocks and just getting lost in traffic, getting lost in the piles. But he was flawless. Like they go through in the Senior Bowl, they go through 2 back, like how you fit the fullback, like are you turning him back, are you running through him, are you an inside out player or an outside in player, in under kind of fits, are you going to how do you fall back with Y off if Y off goes across the formation? How do you fall back your gap? He was brilliant in stuff like that, and he was just so instinctive getting downhill, really sudden. For instance, a 5-tech threw a tackle in his lap on like a counter to the tight end in an I formation look, and he in the short areas he's very, very sudden, and he was able to quickly recognize, swim over the top of that tight end, and he slips blocks in a very effective fashion. And I don't know, maybe it's because he's wearing number 1, but I did get like Jordan Brooks light vibes, very light vibes, but the way he gets downhill and gets after it, and he was let down by poor play around him. And just, these guys have not played together before. they're
Right.
running a very basic defense and they're installing it while also trying to show off their skills. But still, like, very cool.
Um,
And I can't wait to watch his Washington State tape, where I think he was a bit of a playmaker as well. But his best football. I think there's no reason it won't come at the next level. And the final thing with him is, as a rusher, I mean, his length caused issues, and a lot of these running backs in the past pro drills, which are very disadvantageous for them, they're probably inexperienced. But he showed a bit as a rusher, not only like as a guy walking up into the A gap, but as a guy down at line of scrimmage as an outside linebacker. Again, a bit like Brooks did. But like, if you're gonna put him down as the fifth guy on the edge, get him lined up for running back, he had some stuff like push pull move, club swim move, quickness. The length is obviously the big draw there, and yeah, he kind of knew what he was doing. So, and just he's a football player, man. Like
yeah,
he used to play
those are the
quarterback, I
guys.
think, before.
He's just a natural. The fact that he picks up, I mean, it probably speaks to why the transition was so smooth for him that he picked it up that quickly. Now, it is a little jarring to see that he has 6 years of college
Yes.
on his resume, but
But 24 is 24 in November. So he's still young. So
yeah, for as 6 year college students go, yeah.
yes, yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. He definitely has the density and length check marks, and then like all the other things you mentioned. Question: did you see much like under center play action?
Yes. And he was fine in his pickups, but there's an element of like, how much they're cheating that. And
Right.
they've probably been given the two under center play action route pickups that they need. And like, I'm not sure how fast he is over a long distance. Like, he's not slow, but it's not going to be like
Yeah.
4.5 speed. So,
Yeah.
but in terms of like a mid round depth pick, where also it depends what you do with Cody Barton. I think we agree they should re-sign him because the cost will be worth doing. But
Mhm.
and you have to with Brooks' injury, and having some veteran presence there would be handy. And he's not as bad as a lot of people think. He's actually good, but anyway. But Henley, I think would be that kind of. He'd be a massive upgrade on your existing depth, and yeah, I have to see how he tests. I need to watch the Washington State tape, but I'm definitely intrigued to do that. And
Right.
yeah, because if he doesn't test well, then you're like, well, what's the upside here? Because he's old and he's not that fast. But
If
yeah,
if the shuttle and cone is there, then I suspect the cone is with the receiver background.
yeah, he found the ball. The issue with his like short area stuff was just occasionally like his feet are like they're just not planting in the ground in like a someone who'd played linebacker for longer would. He's sort of
Sure.
stalling and it's inefficient moments in his footwork, which even showed up in like the indies. So
Mm.
I don't know if you can correct that or not, but
Yeah.
a cool story. And yeah, I will be watching him more and keeping an eye on him. But these guys exist out in the draft, and because I know it's not like, well, Sewell is like the number one inside linebacker. Is that correct?
It depends on who you ask, but there's
Oh,
Sewell, Simpson, and then
oh yeah, Simpson. Yeah.
who's that guy that transferred from Alabama to what's that? Sanders, Drew Sanders.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people really like him. Now, the interesting question with him though is he actually an edge rusher? He's kind of an Anthony Barr conundrum.
There you go.
In terms of like, is he a edge or is he an off ball linebacker? Um, but did any other off ball backers capture your intrigue?
From a Seahawks perspective, and this is famous last words, I would say not.
Yeah.
I'd need to watch. I mean, Isaiah Land from Florida A&M. I need to watch a bit more of. He'd be like they might view that as like a KJ Wright style thing where he's tall and
Yeah.
but he has short arms.
Yeah. Now, all right. Well, one thing that's interesting about Will McDonald is that some people have floated the idea of him being a permanent off-ball guy.
Yeah, because there's a discussion, isn't it? Like, where do you play him? And then
I don't know
the
if he has
meat.
the density for it. It's weird. I mean, he is an impressive
I mean,
athlete.
permanent seems extreme, right? But I get what you're saying in terms of like his starting, like he could play more football by being an off-ball guy who then comes down on the line of scrimmage in
Yeah,
certain
but
packages,
like
right?
you're right, but there's so little precedence for that, like actually working out in the NFL, like where they're impact players, you know?
Yeah, the we're not quite there yet with the NFL where they have a like a tight front package where the fourth rusher is the inside linebacker and
Right.
the both the outside guys. One's a nickel and it's like and the other one is dropping. We're not quite there yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Will we ever get there? Probably not.
The run's coming back.
Exactly. So
It
it's
came back this past year.
too late. It's been and done.
When enough teams run games are exceeding the efficiency of their quick game, the run's coming back. Unbucket the passing game. Anyway.
Unbucketed. Right. Okay. Let's go to your interior defensive line.
All right. So for the interior guys of like the true big ends and like the true, like, you know, three techniques and like nose tackles. So like Seattle's 3-4 scheme, if we're talking their base defense, you know, the 3-4M are really just talking like three techniques for the most part. And if you're a good three technique, you can play 4-eye. You can play 4 at a pinch, right? Like
That's what we thought they had a lot of last year.
Right. And lo and behold, when they played said 3-4, they looked all right. But like more to the point, like Tony McDaniel, like envision Tony McDaniel and then Puna Ford, envision or picture Puna Ford. Like those two guys are on the opposite ends of the composition spectrum, and they both played the same position in Seattle's defense, and both are good players or decent, you know, did their job right for the most part. So like that right there is just, if you can find a good player, they fit. We don't need to worry too much about fit. But so of the Senior Bowl guys, like none of these guys are first rounders, but there's a lot of quality, like second, third, fourth rounder types, guys that can play snaps and are like solid dudes. And I'll just list them off before I get into them in more detail. But of like the true three techniques, you got like Keanu Benton and Byron Young. And then they not a true like classic like Al Woods or Brian Monet type of nose tackle, but then more of a classic one technique if they played their, you know, their 4-3 over under fronts of old. Nesta Jade Silvera, I thought he was pretty interesting. He could still play 0 like when they play like base bear, but he could also play some 3. I thought those guys were pretty interesting, especially Keanu Benton. And then like of the big ends, guys that you could play 3 technique with, and you know, maybe they could play outside in the 2-4-5 if you wanted. You can move around with them. Carl Brooks stood out. And then another guy that stood out that I had no prior knowledge of was Adetomiwa Adebore. That guy can rush. He can rush from 3 technique. He's like 6'1", 290. He's pretty interesting.
Yes, that's what I wanted to hear about.
Yeah, so he's pretty interesting. Now, like I don't know, he did okay against the run. A lot of his reps, from what I was able to see, like weren't really informative, but nothing like stood out as particularly bad.
Yeah, I was hoping that there'd be more. Again, I wasn't watching this in much detail as you, but like, I was hoping he'd get more looks against, like, you know, say like a 5 tech even against like or just 3 tech, but against like I-form run game. But he seemed to mainly be in when it was nickel 4 down kind of looks where they kind of knew they're getting past, which helped.
Yeah. So that was where he really got to showcase it. Nesta Jade Silvera, I mean, he's good against the run. He can handle combos and zone.
It's interesting you mentioned Jay Silvera and Brooks, because both of them had under 33-inch arms apparently,
Interesting.
which
Interesting.
which again,
Yeah,
if they're impressing with that, it shows they've got they're pretty toolsy. Not to belabor the arm length point, but
right. Well, I mean, so with Nesta J, I mean, like he's all like he starts with like technique and everything and like low pad level. Um, he understands blocking schemes because he was pretty quick to like read pullers and understand like how to play the backside comboer, on zone stuff, like the pressure key and all that. Like he knew how to like reduce against those combos and doubles and stuff, how to get free again. He got in the backfield a little bit. Now he actually has a decent bull rush. He moves pretty well. And for this practice, and I'm sure on his college tape that showed up a little bit as a pass rusher, but don't think that translates toward actually getting pressure in the NFL. But what I think those things do translate to is his ability to get off blocks and run the ball down, which is really important. Like actually be able to make tackles in the hole and like get free when you need to. I feel like that will actually translate for his run defense more than
yeah,
anything.
just think about like when Seattle's run defense was so good in 2021. A lot of the tackles were guys getting free at D line and cleaning up.
Right. So he's got that going for him, although maybe the arm length will give me some pause. But he's a player, like if they take in the fourth round, and he could be there in the fourth round, like, okay, yeah. All right, he's a guy, rotational guy, that can play the run. Now, the most exciting guy of all these, well, let me mention Byron Young. He can kind of do a little bit of everything.
Out of Alabama.
Yeah, the Alabama guy. He's like a legit 300 pounds, like 6'3", 300. He can play a little bit of like big end too. In this, I mean, really, we're talking like 3 technique, but you can put him at 4 eye, and
Which he's
he's
done at Alabama.
right, right. So he's really athletic. He can scrape over blocks or like cross face when you need to, which is really important to that side. But then if you put him like on the weak side of the formation, he could be legit 3 tech rusher. I don't think he's like elite against the run though, but like he can play though.
He had 34-inch arms, so
Yeah. So he probably checks a lot of boxes if they want a guy that can be a little versatile for them. But then I think the best player of the bunch was Keanu Benton, Wisconsin. I mean, he's just a good football player. He can legit rush the passer. He could play 1 technique, 3 technique. In this case, when we talk 1 technique, we really mean 0 now. So he can play that as well. But I think he can be a 3-down player in the NFL, not at that, first, second, or even third rung. We're talking top 10, 12 defensive tackles in the league, but I feel like he can be kind of like in terms of output production, like Puna Ford at his best kind of player. Maybe because he hits the size profile, maybe that naturally bumps up his potential even more. So like he could be a 2nd-round player, I think. Keanu Benton could.
oh wow.
Yeah. And then Carl Brooks, lastly, he impressed a little bit too. I didn't really like his run defense. I feel like he plays too high, but he's really
short arms.
Yeah, he gets penetrative though. So like he was showing up in pass rush.
I
But I
saw
feel like
him
it's kind of fake
penetrating.
though. I feel like it's fake because a lot of the times he was just cheating the blocking scheme. Like he knows what's going on. Good for him.
Yeah, and the offense in a position where they can't adjust their zone call for that, like in the senior ball practice.
Because
Yeah,
they're so limited. So he's like a smart, savvy guy who's quick, but I don't know if I would go that direction with him. He's got to go in the 4th round or lower.
So we only briefly touched on Adebawore.
So he just gets after as a 3 technique.
Yeah,
I mean,
heavy hands.
Heavy hands. You know who he reminds me of? Now, I was shocked that he was only 6'1". I thought he was 6'3".
Well, here, Griff, 6'1", 5/8 of an inch. So
okay,
he's kind of halfway there.
So on his Tinder profile, he's 6'2", is what you're saying. So he reminds me of if Rasheem Green was a little quicker footed in terms of how he rushes. Like a wide arc 3 technique rusher, get up field and corner.
Yeah, I need the way he uses his hands. I like that.
Yeah, but he's just like if because Rasheem just needed slightly quicker feet to fully take advantage of everything he's got going for him. So that's
And he was
him.
really understanding, like if he was to the one-on-one side or
Yeah,
the away from the center slide, and if he was the A gap push player, he'd get from three tech and drive through the center, like absolutely bully the heck out of
yeah,
the center. He'd try and take his shot. And that
yeah.
was really cool.
He's got play strength, so he's an interesting guy. I wouldn't dislike taking him like early day 3 or late day 2.
And I think he'll test well.
Right. But I think if there's a guy this on the D line, or there'd be two of them across all the spots, it'd be Keon White and Keanu Benton probably.
Okay. Nice.
Yep.
So not the best draft unless Seattle gets lucky to in terms of the Senior Bowl and well, have you had a chance to delve into the interior defensive line class other than Senior Bowl guys?
A little bit. There are. I mean, it's a good like mid round defensive line interior class. Like there will be guys that there's going to be a guy taken in the 3rd round that ends up being a good player for someone. Like it's going to be that kind of draft.
Yeah, and I guess we kind of thought, aside from Seattle obviously needing a bit more of a more pass rush, which how familiar is that? But we felt the talent wise, they had a fair bit on the interior of the defensive line. It was more an issue of some other things that became a thing. And a lot of other people said that they projected Seattle's interior defensive line to be better than it ended up being last year.
Right. And the thing though is because they don't have like I mean, like their problem is like cap right now, so they're gonna have to make some cap cuts.
Yeah, one
Because
of the current ones, like a Shelby Harris, a Quentin Jefferson, or and what you do with Pina Ford, one of those three may have to go.
yeah, and like with Elwood's aging and Brian Monet's injury, like I don't feel like they're in a rush to replace these guys because of play, but because of just like natural turnover factors.
Yeah.
So one of these guys, they might get their name called by the Seahawks come draft day.
There you go.
So
Okay, so I think that's in the chat. Don't be afraid to ask about players and share your thoughts and yeah, ask about certain positions. But I think that's the major needs addressed. Outside linebacker, interior defense line, sneaky need, as we've just said, and then inside linebacker. It would have been nice if they'd been proactive last year, but I think there's something there if they wanted to get like a mid-round guy. This was fairly mid-round feeling though from the defense of the Senior Bowl this year, which sometimes that happens.
yeah,
It's not
I
really.
mean the strength of the Senior Bowl is probably the offensive line, especially on the interior.
Yeah.
There are guards and centers there that are good football players.
Yeah.
So that said, it's surprising they didn't just draft like Channing Tindall, last year, like 3rd round. Like, why not?
That feels super like a Seattle
Because
kind of pick.
it was it was a decent inside linebacker draft last year, and they clearly were, bit like it's like, hey, we're all in on Cody, and we're all in on Jordan, but like
I don't know why they weren't a bit more proactive. Like,
right, because you're just getting ahead of possibilities, and like you can just straight up pick the player because you like the player by the time you're in the 3rd round, because even if Cody works out, he only had 1 year left on his deal, and I think he did work out, like you hinted at early on, and especially because the will in the scheme is not a high snap player, his market can't be more than 5 million anyway, but still it's like you could have gotten one of these guys even if you view him as a project, but whatever.
Yeah. So, what is less of a need, but is also a position on defense, is cornerback. And I did look at the nickels and the kind of safeties to see who would go inside. And I don't think for Seattle's defense is quite there. But in terms of the outside cornerbacks, and you think, okay, well, that's probably not that big a need, but it wouldn't hurt to address depth in a way. And Trey Brown remains to be seen what you've got there. I think they probably feel they're set, but Mike Jackson, he did a good job at left corner, but maybe you'd want to push him. Also behind Tariq Woolen, who do you have? Well, no one really, but anyway, it wouldn't hurt to address this position, and there are a lot of intriguing kind of profiles. So the national team had shorter armed types, but as shown with Trey Brown and with DJ Reed, and with kind of how they're approaching the left corner position, and just I think also the way the coverages that they're running now and the techniques they're using, they're not opposed to running stuff and deploying players with the shorter arms. They've got like a established smaller cornerback mold. So the fact that all these guys had under 32-inch arms isn't as big a deal as it used to be. In fact, it could be seen as a reason to go and get them, as kind of like a mirror. So Mekhi Blackman out of USC, he was the most patient guy at the line of scrimmage out of this group. However, athletically, in press I'm talking about, but athletics-wise, I'm not sure how much juice he has in terms of speed. And then the other guy who stood out, and they all made plays to their credit, but the other guy who stood out was Riley Moss from Iowa. In terms of burst and twitch, and he's a white cornerback, which is obviously an unfamiliar thing, but there was talk I heard of him maybe moving to safety. That does not seem like it should happen. But in terms of press, he's a work in progress. He also only has 33/8 of an inch long arms, but in off coverage and just his ability to kind of break to the Inca and accelerate downhill, there's something there. It's like a day 3 pick. He should probably test well as well, but he seemed like the most bursty, which if you're getting a small corner, the reason to do that would be the ability to, in off coverage, stay with those kind of dig routes from bail technique, accelerate down to the comeback. Think kind of what Trey Brown was coming out.
Yeah.
Now, the American roster had every single cornerback with arms over 32 inches and a bunch of, 6'2", 6'1", 6'3" guys. And the immediate standout was Julius Brents from Kansas State, who's 6'3", 33 and 3/4 inch long arms with an 82 and 7/8 of an inch wingspan. This guy is huge, and he, in the release drills where they just have the wide receivers run at the cornerbacks, he was very, very patient. And what I mean by patient is it doesn't matter what technique you're using. It's you keeping your hips square until the receiver's properly declared. So you could be inching off at the line of scrimmage, but until the receiver releases, you're still inching off. You could be soft shoeing, but until the receiver actually picks a side properly, you're staying square. And Brent was the one who was doing that the best. When it came into one-on-ones and stuff like that, he was inching off the line of scrimmage a bit, so taking a few steps back, popping back off the line of scrimmage. But there were also reps where he got hands on people and stayed in there. And that is where it's super exciting to see him deploy his length and his aggression. He actually wanted to go hit guys. He was visibly competitive out there. He is someone I didn't know anything about this cornerback class coming in.
Yeah.
I don't think he'll run that fast, but honestly, he's so long and big and aggressive that you wouldn't need him to. Someone who will run well is Tyreek Stevenson, who I think was the like consensus one like best guy there from people in the industry. Out of Miami, but like technique wise, I was less impressed with him, especially in press. But it's clear to me that he was like the best mover there, and so maybe
Is he like a second rounder to you?
I have no idea, but
Yeah,
like
you got to
for
watch more
instance,
guys.
Daniel Jeremiah has him in his top 50 players, so that
Okay.
gives you an idea of where he's meant to go. But
And
I personally wouldn't. I don't think I'd be surprised if the Seahawks took him.
yeah,
Like, and then the other guy who was impressive was Darius Rush out of South Carolina, who I believe he has a receiver background, 6'1.5", 32 3/4 inch long arms. He was just cheating kind of the one-on-ones and undercutting routes and running routes for receivers, which like you got to respect it. He wasn't wrong, so
yeah,
he was pretty good in press as well. I'm not as big a fan of him as Brent's in press, and also he doesn't have that length. But like, it just in terms of the patience as well, it wasn't quite as good, but it's still there. And he was using a variety of press techniques, mixing it up well at the line of scrimmage, and causing receivers issues, and had a few picks as well from undercutting the ball. So that was cool to see. So an interesting group. Again, not anyone I think, okay, we got to get this guy
yeah.
round 1 or 2. I don't know where Brent is projected to go. But again, I don't think he'll like. It wouldn't shock me if he ran a 4.5,
Right,
But like that doesn't really matter for his profile.
right,
But
right.
it's also that interesting thing of if Seattle is to take cornerback, do they take a smaller guy or take a big guy? Because
Right.
if you're confident about Trey Brown, you almost take a bigger type. I also need to look at Mike Jackson's measurements and what kind of prospect he was coming out, because he's almost an in between.
Right. Right. I mean, and like they need to put bodies on the depth of their roster now, because Burns and Jones won't be there headed into camp.
Yes,
It's
yes,
gonna be Tariq, Mike Jackson, and Brown really on the outside, with Isaiah Dunn probably being a factor, maybe another guy I'm forgetting, but like they're gonna shoot their shot on day 3 with these guys. So with some of them anyway, maybe day 2. I mean, like for all we know, that they could surprise us, with a new coaching staff, and maybe, trying to continue to lean into the scheme. They might, focus day 1 even and totally shock us, early day 2, right? But they are also going to continue to go through their regular channels here, because I mean, they're Tariq Woolen and Kobe Bryant, were day 2 and day 3 picks, right? So
yeah, and I don't know. We can sort of learn a bit from last year and the fact that they took Tariq Woolen, which was them really getting back to the essence of cornerback drafting, which was, can the guy move? Like, can he run? Like, because
yeah,
ultimately the first thing you look for from a corner is, in an ideal world, their movement skills, right? And
yeah,
the NFL is a
right,
world where they can prioritize that. Obviously,
right.
Woolen had crazy length as well, but they were linked with in the pre-draft process, they were linked with that Baylor
The Baylor guy, yeah.
corner, who I forget the name, but he tested great and was kind of like in that nickel mold, probably their Kobe Bryant alternative. Did he probably went before Bryant as well?
I think he did.
So Bryant was probably the next one down on the ladder. But the point being, maybe they're back to more just picking the best kind of movers and groovers who are like ultra competitive, which like out of this group in like a day 3 scenario, that might be Riley Moss.
Interesting. But with but then he's got like some of the shortest arms, right?
Yeah.
It's
Although
interesting.
he is over 6 foot on his Tinder
Yeah.
profile. Yeah.
That's an interesting dynamic. Tall, relatively tall, but shorter arms though.
Yeah.
But he has the feet you're thinking though.
Well, he's just bursty, and
Yeah,
he's good enough coverage.
yeah.
But there was a distinct lack of burst. And you know what else didn't help? You'd like to see the burst from guys like breaking on the ball, like coming down underneath to check down. Doesn't help when the quarterbacks don't throw the ball, even when like you know the drill is for everyone.
Hmm.
Throw the ball,
Right,
and
right.
the quarterback play was particularly bad this year. It's a shame that Hendon Hooker, obviously, he's still recovering from his ACL injury. I'd
Yeah.
have liked to see him out there, but man, that hurts a practice when the quarterback plays like that.
Hmm.
So
Right, right.
yeah, but the guys I liked, Mackay Blackman out of USC, uh, and then Julius Brents out of Kansas State. Darius Rush, I feel like he'll be like a round 2 pick after testing.
Gotcha. Um, quickly, what did you, or as long as you want, what did you think about the safeties?
JL Skinner
Yeah,
was like he just like didn't know what he was doing
yeah,
in man to man, which like why would he? He's also going up against receivers for quite a bit of it, but he just didn't know what he's doing. That he had one rep where he just like decleated a tight end at the stem, which is like okay, that's probably your game. Though it wouldn't work in the NFL really.
yeah.
There was a guy out of the guy out of Illinois. Damn.
Sidney Brown.
Yeah, 30. Yeah,
He's
true ball
go ahead.
coach. So I want to hear what you want to say about him, but he was like locking up receivers in the one on ones and playing with really good technique and very calm and just
Yeah.
playing ball. You know,
So yeah.
that was like a kind of a nickel guy, but I was like, no, Matthew, this is not a nickel. Like this is just a toolsy kind of safety. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Well, so I had the same general impression. I was like, okay, who's this guy? And I looked him up. Okay, Sidney Brown. And then when I pulled up the Senior Bowl roster, I'm like, okay, he's moving like that at 5'10", but pushing 215. Like that's a really good density to have those kind of movement skills and kind of
It
grace. So
is.
so that kind of just makes him intriguing in general. I didn't get to see if he can hit or not, so I need to actually watch him more in depth.
Well, I
Um,
believe the take on him is that he was never really playing out in this kind of space before,
hmm,
and that he was mainly just like yeah, he didn't get these kind of glitzy man coverage or like even like playing in a deep half or post
yeah,
assignments.
yeah. The other two names that kind of, well, three names really, and I didn't get to key in on them. I thought Jamie Robinson out of Florida State. I think he's just like a really clean football player, like in general, kind of like jack of all trades, perhaps master in none. But I think he's a quality safety, and like it's the safety position in the NFL is such that if you're super assignment correct, you can be a really good player without having obscene traits.
Right.
But then quickly the other two like obvious names were like DeMarco Helms out of Alabama. That guy can run and hit, and then Christopher Smith, Georgia, super rangy, but then he can't really tackle like at all. But I don't know, I was curious, what did you think of those three? If you noticed anything from them?
Yeah, that I think I didn't really get a chance to watch, but whenever I was watching, I mean, yeah, they were mainly the ones popping out. But yeah, Sidney Brown, that's uh that's the guy. But and also we should say the safety position for the Seahawks is like one where it's like a you'd like some depth,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I think third,
and they
fourth
have
round
picks.
might be the
Like
spot to do it. But if they want to go higher, they can. Um, like I'm not opposed to them really taking safety at any slot except for 5. You know, like fine if they really like a guy, okay, because Quandre Diggs isn't a spring chicken, and I don't know what Jamal Adams' injury / contract situation is,
Right.
So
Yeah, and Adams is also just a complete unknown in terms of that recovery. Sounds absolutely brutal. You'd back him to be able to do it, but
yeah.
that just does not sound great.
Yeah. So as we approach further and further into draft season, or as we dive farther and farther into draft season, the safeties I'm going to really get into, because I feel like there's going to be a good player in the second or third round.
I wanted to see a bit out of I didn't really see much from the safeties. It's always tough at the Senior Bowl because it's I mean, even with the corners, it's dependent on if the ball gets thrown their way sometimes. But the safeties, it really especially with crap quarterbacks, you're kind of just looking at them. If they're playing in the post, and it's a crap quarterback.
Do they have functional range? And
yeah, there's not much you can glean from that.
You can kind of tell, like when they play when they play quarters, you kind of just see how efficient they are with their footwork and stuff, and how they kind of close
but they don't play they don't play quarters at the Senior Bowl.
Right. Well, you get a little bit of it in the practices.
You do?
Yeah.
I thought it was all covered too.
Well, I feel like I saw. I mean, I was watching D-line, but I felt like I saw them inside foot up.
Yeah, it's classic D-line brain. I
swear I saw
one of these big oafs in the trenches. I know it.
You know what? Maybe I'm mistaking from when I've actually seen them playing actual for their team, their actual tape.
Yes.
Now I'm wondering if I'm conflating memories and stuff.
Oh no, I've gaslit you.
I think I gaslit myself.
Yeah, that's messed up.
I swear I saw quarters. I have to be thinking of something else.
Oh dear. Yeah. I was disappointed with Skinner, but then also he didn't really get a chance to do any of what he was good at. So,
but I don't think he's a player anyway. I mean, maybe he is, but he just wants to take people's head off. So I don't think he's gonna. He at 6'4", he doesn't really fit. With his play style,
no,
he just doesn't fit. If he did, they have Ryan Neal anyway.
Yeah, and is it Helms out of Alabama?
Yeah.
Scout the player, not the helmet. But I don't know sometimes what I'm doing with Alabama safeties because they're just so well trained and they just know so much, and it's really difficult.
He's really not that fast is kind of the problem.
Yeah, and that reminds me of quite a few Alabama safeties coming out,
Right.
They're super smart and they can tackle and they can hit, and they can do a variety of coverage techniques, but they're often not very fast. And then it's what's the upside? But then is that a depth piece? Again, we're talking kind of mid-round, round 4 types.
And that's why with that type of concept of a safety, I'd be more in on Jamie Robinson, because I just feel like he's just the best version of that. Those guys.
And it is Jamie, because
it's Jamie? Because there's a double M. So
I didn't know if it's Jamie.
I mean, I thought that's a great name for a DB, Jamie Robinson.
It's always good to be Jamie.
That's the kind of guy you read about 100 years from now, Jamie Robinson, the phenom.
So you see him as a kind of post safety, right?
Well, I kind of see him as a do-it-all safety. He can truly do a little bit of everything. He can even play a little bit of nickel.
In
zone. But I think
Quandre Diggs.
Maybe he's so you watch, he's like a robot. Seriously, even the angles he takes on ball, he does from your you as a coach and other coaches, I bet from a coaching perspective, they're oh wow, I love this guy. He's so detail oriented, but he probably will run a 4.55, probably have a 7-second flat 3 cone. He's 5'11", 205 pounds, whatever. but he's just in the right place. He understands like quarters, like the economy of movement, like going from 2 to 1, knowing when to overlap. Well, he played a little bit of single high, a little bit. Like he can go from seam to seam at least. When he's in nickel, he can carry stuff. He can hit. He can get off blocks as 200-pounders go. Like it's just a little bit of everything. Like he's not a game changer, but he can be a really high quality safety. Like the perfect example is like the Broncos safety opposite Justin Simmons is like a corner convert, Kareem Jackson, right? He's like 34 years old, but he can still play football just because he knows what he's doing out there.
Man, you got me
So
pumped I've got to watch him. I
so
need to rewatch the tape. I don't know how I missed that.
I mean, he may not have done much in the Senior Bowl, but I feel like he's a legit player. Like he'll definitely be a starter in the NFL. I feel.
So he's like a round 2, round 3 pick.
I think so. Yeah.
Well, there you go. We'll be back next. When can you do, Griff?
Because we want to talk Senior Bowl offense, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the exciting stuff. We do Thursday if we want.
Yeah, we'll be back on Thursday with a look at the offense from the Senior Bowl, where we'll have talk on the tackles, the interior of the offensive line, the wide receivers, maybe a bit of quarterback talk, maybe a bit of running back talk, but we'll again do it in the same way where we'll deal with the Seahawks position needs first. But until then, thank you everyone for joining us. It's been fun after a brief hiatus. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment if you're listening, 5-star review, follow the Twitter at Seattle Overload, follow Griff at CMike Spinmove, follow me at Matty F. Brown. Thank you everyone for joining us live. We appreciate it. And yeah, it's draft season now. We're ramping up, fully on it. And we also get to talk about free agents, Gino when he resigns, all that fun stuff. We can repeat all of our Gino talking points.
Indeed. Also, we might need to talk potential coaching move if Sean Desai gets the Denver job or not.
Oh, yes. And we didn't even talk about the Pro Bowl flag football drift. Like, it's messed up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So Gino was the star of the show, though.
He was. He added some dollars. And yeah, we could break that tape down.
Yeah, as Taylor mentioned in the chat, he was dealing at the Pro Bowl. He's like the best 7-on-7 quarterback in the country. Which is to say, year 2 from Abraham Lucas to Charles Cross. Look out.
That's basically the same. There we go. Goodbye, everyone.